Hello, welcome to Cannabis Conversations. Today we're going to be dispelling myths about the plant in honor of 420 and really thinking about how cannabis policy and social justice issues impact schools. And if you're a school social worker, school counselor, I know for me, definitely we often get called in when a student brings something to campus. So just wanting to provide more information. So I invited my wonderful husband to come on to provide some insight because he works in the cannabis industry. So let me go ahead and add him. So you may see our daughter. We're both in the house. And he graciously offered to be downstairs, so I'm upstairs. Hi, nice to see you again after like a minute. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the followers and the people that are joining right now.
Is the sing along songs too loud for you in the background? You good?
No, she's our daughter's probably watching Yo Gabba Gabba or Elmo.
Tell me if it's too loud and I'll turn it down a little bit.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay. So everybody, my name is Rico Lamitte. I am the lesser half of Jasmine Lamitte, LCSW, and father of Zora. I thought she was going to come on stage with us here. And I have been in the cannabis industry now for 6 years. A long story of abuse in my family, a lot of trauma experience growing up, and I learned about the plant the wrong way. And when I started to find out what it meant that cannabis really is medicine, I became an advocate. I became obsessed with it, and I loved it. And it's just a blessing to be in a place where we can actually pass that knowledge on to parents, educators, and legislators abroad, because there's so many myths around it. And I bring people together on the business side, the lifestyle side, and also on the community outreach side of the industry, so we can educate ourselves and learn about it, and
excuse me,
just become better stewards of that information, so that's what I do. I own a media company and am a broadcaster for the State of Cannabis Newshour, a huge news show daily, and that's what we do. We give the facts out there to the people. We make sure the industry is protected when it comes to politics, and politicians make sure that they get the right information and are checked if they don't. And we help people thrive, I should say, in this industry.
Yeah,
thank you. Sing her ABCs.
We've been together 12 years, and when I first met him, he was in finance and was miserable, and I really encouraged him to follow his passion. So to see him really become a leader, advocate for social justice issues, and definitely has taught me a ton. I'll be really honest. I not a lot of knowledge other than seeing my friends use. I didn't really understand. Been able to attend, conferences and see doctors talk about it, see parents talk about how to talk to their kids. I just feel so much more prepared to department, to talk to parents, caregivers, and students. So let's kind of transition. Obviously, there's a lot of stigma surrounding cannabis. So I think it would be helpful to kind of talk about like your first exposure to the plant. I think you were exposed in a way a lot younger than I was, and right. I think your experience really speaks to some of the things that our students that we work with might face.
Yeah. So I grew up in rural Virginia, and I was exposed to the plant a lot younger than most, and we had bad information about it, bad information from the school, bad information from our peers. Nobody knew that cannabis could be medicine at the time. And it led to getting in trouble. And it led to some of my friends getting in trouble with the law um, a lot more heavy-handedly than they should have, because a lot of the people with power, whether it's on a municipal level, a state level, or whatever, they just don't have the right information. And if people are more educated about the plant, they'll know how to protect themselves, how to protect their families. The kids won't be curious about it; they'll know exactly what it is, and we'll just be in a better place. I've been seeing a lot of stuff recently in the news about kids being exposed to edibles and different smoking devices. It's happening a lot right now, and with people having the bad information, the wrong information from a state level, they're not going to be able to protect their families. It's going to be a lot worse than a kid bringing alcohol to school. So it's important we educate the uh, politicians, the school board, uh, everywhere, the local citizens, because the state's not doing it a lot of times. And when they are, they don't always have the right information. Um, People can get hurt. It's medicine, but it's also medicine that people enjoy,
Right.
and so it's something that can't be classified, you know. But I have a passion for it because it helped me, after college football, deal with a lot of things that were leading to addiction. And the more we talk about how we broke out of these cycles, the more people can find out, do their own research, and there's a lot out there. And just realize that because something is federally legal right now does not mean that it's not going to be within the next year or two. And you're going to see a lot more of it. So the best thing you can arm yourself with is information, um, and everything is data driven too. So I know, especially in your school system, how much they love data, and they like to go and follow the trends. All the information's out there. It's our job to make sure people have the right information and they can move forward with their lives, knowing what it
Yeah.
is and what it's not.
Yeah, and I think that's so important because I mean, I definitely see our policies for consequences really reflect kind of the policies that exist in your state, your county, the
Hmm.
federal policies, and certainly those are more impacted for students of color, for Black
Yeah.
and Brown students. You definitely see kids that are getting suspended, like who gets suspended and who gets a pass, right?
Right.
Kind of even looking at that at a deeper level. My first exposure, so I from Southern California. I'm also half Jamaican, and so I think I always had kind of a stigma associated. My dad definitely consumed; he's the one, and I hate when people would make stereotypes about me because, oh, you're
Yeah.
Jamaican. The first thing that people would say. So I would really try to distance myself, even though I, was around it and saw people, doing it. And so I had developed my own stigma until I went to college. I went to Pomona College, which is a pretty high performing school, and to see college students using that I knew were very successful. I wasn't something that I was interested in, but it started to change my perception of even who consumed.
Right.
Um, and then I met you and in Chicago, and you definitely really changed my perspective what and who uses, and I think it definitely helped when you met me when I was a very busy social worker, very stressed
Yeah.
at work, and definitely was having a lot of wine after work to compress, which is not the best thing, but they let people love posting things about wine days or moms that are drinking wine. That's completely acceptable, but as soon as like cannabis is brought into the picture, it's not acceptable. So I started to really think deeper about that. Like, why is that? Why is it okay to use alcohol and that's fine and fun, but so I
Yeah.
really started to explore that.
So
Okay,
we're fine.
let's talk a little bit about some of like the policies that are happening
Hmm.
at federal level. We probably have some people here. Obviously, they're in California, but people that are going to be tuning in that are not in California. So, what are some of the things that impact schools that we should be on the lookout for?
Yeah. So the most pressing issue is everybody wants to know when it's going to happen, when federal legalization is going to happen. Um, it's tough to know when something will actually occur, but there's a couple of bills out right now. The MORE Act, that one just passed the House, and that one is for descheduling of cannabis. There's a difference between descheduling and legalization and decriminalization as well. That's important to know on a state level and on a federal level. So decriminalizing means it's not an offense that you can actually get charged for on a federal level. But the laws are very convoluted, and some of it is pointing to building a war on drugs 2.0, right? The problem with the war on drugs, the biggest problem is it was a government attack on Black and brown communities, and that information has been released. And so a lot of communities are now able to participate in the cannabis industry. It might be one of your communities out there if you're operating as an educator or as a social worker. And you need to meet those people, make sure that they're educating you. The legal businesses in the industry, they want to educate their fellow constituents for whatever municipality. Like here in Los Angeles, they want to know what's going on. They want to know how Eric Garcetti, our mayor, is going to handle it. They want to know how close it can be to schools. They want to know if a child, God forbid, gets access to it. What are the proper procedures to make sure that they're safe, make sure that doesn't happen, preventative measures. So it's a huge reckoning coming. It's already happened on a municipal level. It's happening on a lot of state levels. And when it happens on the federal level, expect to see a lot of more dispensaries operating like liquor stores. Right? You know how to have a liquor cabinet and stash your liquor away, or have it up high in the kitchen so the kids can't get to it. There's going to be a lot of education coming out from advocates like us because the governments are not doing it. So this is why I applaud you for what you're doing, having me on, even though Zozo is climbing all over me. Because we need to make sure people have good information, period. But the MORE Act is for descheduling it because it's a Schedule 1 drug right now. Next to heroin, fentanyl also. And the U.S. government, up to, I think, last year as well, said that there's no medicinal use for the plant, unfortunately. But you're allowed to do what you want on the state level. So it's very convoluted what's real and what's not. But the big news is it's right around the corner. I would say 2, maybe 3 years, and it's going to happen under Republican law. So people need to know about that too. And the Republican side of the conversation, they want profit. On the Democratic side, they want communities paid back for what was done to them over the war on drugs. But it's looking like the Republicans are going to win a lot of seats this midterm election. So prepare for it to happen under Republican control.
Yeah,
so you're going to see a lot more of this stuff, and you're going to have a lot less information out there that's not biased.
Right.
So
yeah,
that's what's happening, and parents should prepare.
Something that you said really stuck out to me, the educating first piece. What's happening in schools right now, we're seeing a lot of students bringing edibles to school, distributing to kids who maybe don't know what they're consuming. There's definitely vapes happening, definitely tobacco vapes, and also cannabis vapes happening. And I think one of the things that schools are motivated by are these assembly bills that force us to have some kind of plan for intervention. So like there's an assembly bill for suicide prevention. There's an assembly bill for supporting students experiencing homelessness. But right now there isn't one, at least in California, for drug awareness and prevention. And so it definitely gets put on the back burner a lot of the times. So that's something like I'm thinking about for next year. Like even though it's not required, like it's something that we should be doing so that parents and caregivers know how to talk about cannabis and other drugs and alcohol, and kids have the right information to make informed decisions about their bodies and about their peer groups and all of that.
Right.
So I think it would be helpful to talk a little bit about some of the myths. So I've learned a lot from you about like language and some of the kind of reefer madness kind of things that are
Yeah.
not true. That I think would be helpful as if a student comes to you to have those facts. So there's a lot of like back and forth. Like I know cannabis, that term is obviously like a scientific term,
Yes.
but I constantly see, like, even in legislation, the term marijuana being used. So what's the most appropriate term to be used?
It's cannabis. So cannabis sativa is the actual plant. There's different derivatives of it. Some more psychoactive than others as well. Marijuana is a very divisive term because it was used as a slur back in the Henriette Alsinger days, the early days of Prohibition back in the 1920s. And it was to depict people of Mexican descent as evil and putting their devil's lettuce in our economy. It was 100% racist. However, there are some people that don't care and they still use the term marijuana. I have a few friends that are Mexican and they said that they were uneasy about the word, so I don't use it. That's my personal choice. So some people are sensitive about it. I wouldn't say most, but a lot of people aren't. So we got to know that if you're talking about it, it's cannabis. It's not marijuana. It's something to look out for because words matter, and just know that that could hurt somebody's. It could strike a nerve with somebody, right?
Yeah, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Because I definitely hear it. And I definitely, use that industry really try to get cannabis. But I see people talking about marijuana all the time.
Yeah.
So I think as educators, as mental health professionals, use scientific terms, and when we're talking about anything, it's really important. So the other thing that I hear about is cannabis being a gateway drug to other drugs. Do you agree with that? If a kid who's like 8th grade is smoking, are they going to open up the door and try heroin?
No. Study after study after studies come out and shown that cannabis is not a gateway drug. In fact, there's one I wrote about on our news show yesterday, and study came out in 2015, and Ricky Rubio, politician, Marco Rubio, down in Florida, is telling people that it is a gateway drug. It has been proven time and time again, study after study, academic peer-reviewed studies showing that it is not a gateway drug. The true gateway drug, 88% tied to addiction of opioids and other substances, is alcohol, not cannabis. Cannabis actually, in some cases, has shown promise and stellar results in helping people break addiction. People who know me know that's a huge part of my personal story. And it can happen to any of us. Addiction can happen to any of us. So it's not safe. It's destructive and it is dangerous for people to put out these lies because you have children that have put cancer into remission with cannabis treatments. It helps with autism. You can attest to that. You've seen it firsthand.
Yeah.
It's medicine at the end of the day. And the more we learn about it, the more we'll understand its benefit, its merit, the opportunity to have medicine grown in your house is very scary to a lot of people who are being paid by the status quo, So, the story the story I covered the other day with Marco Rubio, he said that not only is cannabis a great gateway drug, but it's also being mixed with fentanyl. That's not true. We have to call out these things because, it's not true at all. It was proven false, and that story, a follow-up story came out about 3 weeks later, and it was the Connecticut Police Department that put out. They tracked that back to them, and it was a false statement made by somebody from in Connecticut. So, like little things like that, people don't hear the corrections. People hear just like the main story. So it's important we develop communities.
Latch on to information that propels. I think the other thing that we're seeing a lot of, and I'm seeing this everywhere from like CVS to 7-Eleven, is CBD, right?
Yes.
And I think you've told me like not all CBD is created equal, but can you talk a little like how is CBD different than and how can somebody be an adult, right? Because we should
so
but how can people determine what's best for them?
So CBD is in a huge legal loophole in the United States. Hemp bill was passed back in 2018, and it allowed interstate, it allowed the FDA and the federal regulators to ease up on restriction and allow the sale of hemp-based products. And without getting into the politics side of it, what happened was a lot of people were ill-informed to what hemp is. Hemp is the industrial side of the cannabis plant. It is cannabis, CBD, cannabidiol, and it is psychoactive. People need to understand that. So when people say it's not psychoactive, that's completely false. And people need to understand that. People need to understand the meaning of the word psychoactive. When you take a Advil, it is technically psychoactive. Anything that changes the molecules inside of you, right, alters anything with your mood or your behavior is technically psychoactive. Okay. So when people say that, it's a slight misnomer, but tiptoeing our way into legalization, we need to know these terms. We need to know the science behind it, because more misinformation and disinformation is going to be pushed from it, right? So CBD, THC is the much more psychoactive side of the plant. That's what you're going to have as a regulated item. That's what's Schedule 1 on a federal level. Most states have opened up and legalized or opened up at least medical programs. And that is traditionally what you see people categorizing others as being stoned, as being high, right? CBD is really not going to get you there like that. There's two main types of CBD on the market you need to look out for. There's a full spectrum and broad spectrum or distillate. Full spectrum, it can only be sold in dispensaries. It has THC in it. There is content in it. That's what we call the entourage effect. There's different compounds, molecules throughout the cannabis plant, and some are bred differently than others. Some have high levels of CBD, so you're going to have less of a psychoactive effect with that particular combination. And if there's a high THC and low CBD formulation, then you're going to be a lot less. She's like choking me. You're gonna have a much more powerful effect, and you're probably going to have some. You're gonna be woozy. Just put it that way. You're not gonna have brain fog. That's what and you can do that from full spectrum CBD. Sometimes on topicals, with topicals, sometimes with tinctures, with vaporizers. Some people do combustibles, smoking, and there's all different kinds of ways to take your medicine. So, and you need to know these different methods because they're going to pop up like everywhere.
Yeah, hearing those terms, right? Like that one for me. But if you're hearing as students are talking, and if you're a counselor, social worker, and they're having this knowledge, it's really kind of switched gears here a little bit. A lot of my followers and also parents and caregivers want to know how to talk to their kids about, and to their students about cannabis. I'm first going to kind of go through some of the things that I, do with students, or I've done in the past, and then I'd love to hear, kind of your perspectives. I know you've worked with like the Drug Policy Alliance and like other organizations that are really about educating and providing adults with kind of the tools on how to have these conversations. So one of the things that I think is really important, if you're a parent or caregiver, is to, set expectations and limits, and also what the consequences in your household will be early on. I think sometimes we're so scared to have a conversation because we think it'll plant a seed. If you're conversation with them, guess what? Their peers, they're going to see it. They have the internet at their fingertips. They're going to find ways, music, television shows. So it's better for them to be hearing this information from you and get perspective. Educating yourself is really important. So if you are having things based on your own past experiences. Things have changed a lot, since I was in high school or since I was in college. So making sure that you know the facts, know what is relevant to like your county, to your school district, and being honest with kids and with teens about that. Something that as I was thinking about how are we going to talking to parents and giving guidance, that I found was that research shows that you should start talking to your kids just like in passing, about drinking, smoking, and drugs, between starting in like kindergarten. So obviously using age appropriate language, but guess what? They're going to see commercials for beer on TV, see things in the background, and so they might be curious about that. So being able to provide them with age appropriate information about what they're seeing, learn about it, so that you're being aware of what conversations are happening. Kids are they really listen. You might think that they don't, but you might be talking to friends in the other room, and they're sponges. You want to make sure that you're providing them with that space, but do it informally at dinner, in the car ride, so it's not this talk, right? Coming in the room and having this sit.
Right.
If you have people in your family that consume, being able to talk to them about what they're seeing, about consuming responsibly, about why it's okay for adults to do this. Right here in California is 21, so being honest with them about the consequences, that their brains are still developing, that they need to protect their their development, before they're able to make that decision as an adult. Right. If that's something that they want to do. The other thing I'll say is abstinence only does not work. It's been proven, like whether you're talking about sex or drugs, providing honest information, so that kids know the facts and are able to use that information for them. You have to raise students, and in schools, like we should be teaching kids how to make responsible decisions, so that way if they are pressured to consume or they're offered something, they have a practice about what to say, right? Just say no is not always going to work. Give them some language. I thank you so much for offering that. I think I'm going to pass it, right? So giving them those words so that they can know what to say and have a plan. It's really about harm reduction for teens. So if kids can be honest with you about what your friends are doing or what they're doing, they're more likely to come to you if something happens, right? Like my biggest fear for our daughter in the future is that she doesn't feel comfortable coming to us if she's made a bad mistake, right? Like I want her to go to her friends and for advice. I want her to us. Yes, there'll be consequences, blah blah blah, but like ultimately we love you and we want you to be safe. So like whatever I can talk about it right now, we're gonna give you the help. And lastly, if your team is using, or you have students that are using, being curious about it, right? So instead of like you're doing this, grounded for a month, every your friend, maybe that's the consequences you provide. But often kids are doing it for a reason. I would be really concerned. Our daughter in the future was doing this to cope with something, like to feel anxious. Is she feeling depressed? Is there something that she's numb? Is she, kind of self-medicating, or is it curiosity, spelling? Like, I would want to know, kind of coming from, rather than just immediately going to like you're grounded, So, what would you say? I know we haven't really talked about this, but we're, a teenager before we know it. So,
yeah, it's very important, and a lot of children, like myself, when I was at a young age. When you're taught this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, you're going to want to know why is it so bad on one level or the other. So instead of making it a taboo, make sure they know about it, know what it is, know why it's used, also know how it is abused. Um, those are conversations we need to start having with our families, with our peers, um, and just limit the amount of mass media marketing of it. The cool thing about the cannabis industry is there's a litany of doctors, lawyers, educators in the industry nationwide that put out free information all the time. Um, and these are people who have been doctors, scientists, lawyers, professionals across the board in the industry for 10, 15, 20 years. They're very respected. And just do a quick Google search. If you see something, you hear something, you don't know what it is, find out. It's going to be everywhere. Um, I think about the words, they're so important. Um, Cannabis, like we just talked about, or saying intervention. You need to have a cannabis intervention. Your kid's becoming a pothead. No, that's you're gaslighting right there, and you
Yeah, we
don't
were
know
talking about that
what the
as
root cause is.
We were coming up with a title, and I was like, cannabis conversations, prevention, intervention, whatever. And he was like, in the community, saying intervention, like within the drug community, that can be a trauma reminder or a trigger because of intervention for that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we use that word all the time in schools. So it was something that I had to wrap my brain around when I talking to families about this. I was like, that's really good information to know. I had no idea about that.
Yeah, this cannabis, like I said, it's a very emotional topic with people. So you say you're having an intervention, even in a marketing sense. Just know people on the other side of the bridge, they see that as a trigger word, right? Because they've been called addicts, stoners. They've been called all different kinds of things along the way, and now all this information is coming out. Big corporations are taking advantage of it, and it hurts. People's families have been torn apart when a mother tries to get medicine for her child and the state doesn't allow it. But that's the only thing keeping that child alive. That's the only thing stopping that child's seizures. Know these stories, learn these stories, just hop online. We just need to do that. We just need to get out and reach out to the community, ask them, what are you going to do to keep this cannabis out of our schools? Don't listen to politicians. If it's an issue, reach out to your communities, your fellow community members. These are fellow citizens, neighbors, and almost all legal business owners, they do what they can to make sure that the community is educated. Put those programs together. There's no communication, is what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
In between the two, there's just a bunch of reactionary experiences that ends up hurting both sides, and in the end, it's going to be corporate pretty soon. You can see maybe at every Walgreens, your local pharmacy, or it's going to be available on Amazon soon. Mistakes will be made. Instead of freaking out about it, just learn about it. If your kid gets into the liquor cabinet, yes, it can be scary. Yes, it can be a very traumatic event happening. But we're educated to know what to do. You call an ambulance, or you just take care of your kid, or in certain circumstances, maybe call the police. You can't jump to that conclusion with cannabis either, right? You have to assess what's going on, slow down, and just think about it. Do you want to ruin this kid's life, his family's life, by calling the police? There are decisions you need to make, knowing that there are huge consequences to it, especially in communities of color, right? Joe Biden said that he actually promised on his last campaign that he was going to, he said marijuana, right? The cannabis should be legalized, or at least decriminalized, and nobody should be in jail for it. It hasn't happened, because those attacks are happening in she's counting, they're happening in our communities, right? Because people are calling the cops when they see a bag or they see some vapes. You know, just take a step back, take a half second step back, and just realize the what's happening on a broader level, and do the right thing for your family and your community. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you bring up a good about, so one of the couple of the questions or several of the questions that came in. And if you have questions, please feel free to drop them or comment so we can answer them at the end. How do we convince administration to refrain from suspending or expelling students in response to cannabis
Yeah.
possession? Or what do I do if a student tells me that their parent consuming and they have access to it, like is that reportable to DCFS or CPS? And I think you bring up a good point. You really have to spend some time really assessing the situation, and it does depend on your county and what is considered reportable in terms of mandated reporting. You have to protect your license and all of that. But sometimes, the police are going to worse, right? Like, how would they respond to a black family or a brown family in that situation versus a white family in like a suburban situation and community? So I often think about that, like how is this call going to, further the school to prison pipeline? How is suspension
Yeah.
going to do that? So, in terms of like how to get admin to stop doing that, that's really tough. I know in LA, 5 school districts, it is suspendable if they're consuming or bringing the on campus. If they're distributing or selling, that's an expellable offense.
Yeah.
And it's really at the discretion of the school leader. So, being able to share resources and information, I think if you are at a school that's predominantly black or brown, like helping them understand the racism and inequity that exists when it comes to this plan, and how your one decision or one kids make mistakes all the time, a lot of dumb stuff. Um, how are we going to let this one change the course of their life?
It's okay to have these conversations with your school board. It's okay to have these conversations with educators, and bring these business owners into these conversations with you. You got to understand there's consequences to everything, and you need to. We as a society should be looking at the root causes of what's going on. Like, why would this kid want to go behind their parents' back? We need to start treating, the wounds before we put a band-aid on it, right?
Yeah.
Like punishment, sometimes the punishment doesn't fit the crime, yes, but also sometimes there's a deeper issue that needs to be addressed, and not just putting people in jail. And unfortunately, the way the laws are right now, people are going to go to jail, and then there's a domino effect after that that affects our entire community. So
Yeah.
yeah, we really need to talk about that. And let's see, students that are out there, like find out what's going on with their families. If they're doing stuff like that, take a time machine back into when you were going through adolescent things, or you in high school when you acted out. Like, there's always a deeper issue behind it, and we need to start talking about that and helping the families get through that, rather than attacking and punishing the surface level.
Yeah. The last thing that I wanted to kind of give you some space to talk about, because you're so great at it, is just kind of the social justice, anti-racism, equity component of the cannabis industry, and kind of what you're seeing in terms of, response to or lack of response to the impacts of the war on drugs and the disproportionate convictions of Black and brown folks that are still in prison over small possession. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think, for a lot of my followers are working with kids whose, parents are incarcerated, things like this.
So yeah, the programming you're talking about is like social equity. Social equity is unfortunately not much more than like a marketing word right now. But the idea behind it, the philosophy behind it is beautiful. It's about righting the wrongs of the war on drugs, acknowledging what happened, and instead of taking the entire profit, the corporate entities, helping the communities that have been negatively affected by the war on drugs. It's supposed to help folks that have been wrongly targeted, communities that are wrongly targeted by those in power and give them an opportunity to participate in the cannabis industry. It's without trying to promote the cannabis industry. I'm not allowed to promote anything tonight. There's a lot of opportunity in it, and like 95% of any occupation right now in today's economy, it's available in the cannabis industry. It's helping communities out, Black and white communities, and you're just going to see a lot more people involved in that boon that is happening right now. People don't understand like how big it is, and there's going to be a lot more people getting involved. Amazon is no longer drug testing. A lot of schools, a lot of in New Jersey, just yesterday, they said that police officers are going to be allowed to consume in their downtime.
Hopefully, right?
Yeah, hopefully. But this is why it's so important to educate yourself. It's going to be absolutely everywhere. There's a lot of there's a big economic opportunity, and that's why it's going to be legalized, most likely under Republican reign. You just got to prepare for that. You're going to see it everywhere. You're going to see everybody using it. There's going to be more opportunities for access, to people in our communities that shouldn't be accessing it without the proper training on how to.
And kids,
right?
You
how to deal with it. Educate yourself. The resources are out there, and right now, because it is federally illegal still right now, just check the sources. Reach out to us. That's what we do. At the State of Cannabis Newshour, you can check us out there. We have a full team of doctors, lawyers, scientists, and we read the big news stories, and we respond to them every single day, making sure people have correct information, making sure people have the connections to opportunities if they want to get in, and to make sure that something that has negatively affected our communities generationally is not given as a gift to those who oppressed us.
Right.
Who literally destroyed our communities. Sorry, you give me my soapbox. You got me in the activist mode now. They have concrete facts, evidence dated back to Nixon with the Nixon tapes that it was a targeted attack on our communities. And if these multinational corporations are able to make billions of dollars off of it right now, in the long run, it's going to be trillions. Believe that, know that. And our communities can continue to suffer.
Our country hasn't provided the Black community reparations, but this could be, a way to do that, right? Because it's so much money, we're so targeted. Like, how can that be utilized to actually give those reparations? I'm like, yes, give me that money.
Right. It's not. Yeah. It's not a perfect system. Social equity is allowing people that are in those communities to participate. And like I said, you don't have to touch the plant, right? I don't touch the plant. And on the work side, at least, I'm not a distributor. I'm not a seller of cannabis. I own a media company. I'm in the media. I interview people. I help them tell their stories, whether they're good or bad, so people know what's real and what's not, right? You know how important that is to me. That people have the right information, because it really irks me to see our communities missing out on that opportunity because of what happened in the past, built off of lies.
And I definitely see in schools that information being continuously perpetuated.
Correct.
So now I kind of want to switch over to answering any questions that people have specific to how to support students, or maybe how to talk to your kids, policy, things like that. So if you have a question, feel free to drop it in the comments. I will answer the 3 questions that did come through. So one of them was, is cannabis use in the home reportable to DCFS or CPS? So I can only speak to LA because every place is a little bit different on how these agencies operate. I know LA County is so overworked in DCFS that some of the things that I think they would have taken as a report pre-pandemic, they're not taking. So, unless the student the parent is either making the student consume cannabis, or they're having repeated instances of this child getting access to their cannabis. You can always call and consult if you truly feel that the child is in danger. I think that's our duty, but oftentimes it isn't. Now, other places that aren't as lenient about cannabis might be, if you don't report this, your license or your credential might be in jeopardy. So it's really important to check on, what the requirements are in your county and your school district. Another one that came up was, what do we do if a parent is noticeably high or smoking at school drop off? Okay. Yeah. So I think again, it's about safety, right? So if they, California, there's all of these freeway signs now that says, if you're under the influence of cannabis while driving, that's a DUI. It's obviously a little bit more difficult to determine. I think they have developed some breathalyzers for cannabis now, or they're working on that. But if a parent that is high, that is a concern. So it would be a consultation with these. But I also would want to connect with that family and kind of provide some education about that. How dangerous that is. All of that, providing that information. The other one through is about how do we convince administration for prevention and expulsion. I think we have to be advocates for seeing any policies that are harmful to students, especially their disproportionate our most vulnerable student population, or our Black and Brown. We have to shed light on that. Try to, there's only so much power we have, but always try to have a trail, right? So have it up with resources, continue to bring it up, be able to operate from a solution perspective versus a people perspective, right? So be equivalent to our system, right? Was about have a to help students and to get them going through and on happy lives, and we're kind of stopping.
Right. Can I say something to that one?
Yeah.
Is the child safe? And that's all of our that's your first responsibility.
Yeah.
Is the child safe? How can that situation best be handled? If a parent comes under the influence of any kind, making sure the child is safe is paramount. I think, like, second in that situation, can you take control of the vehicle, get that person out of the vehicle, and see if you can contact a relative, somebody on staff can assist. There's ways to de-escalate without putting somebody deeper in a bind, before you even go to the root of the problem, like we were talking about earlier, right?
Mhm.
You have no idea what's going on in that behind the scenes there, and why this person is acting that way. And if you already have a relationship with that person, whether it's directly or through their child, um, just know, like, you could be involved in making things better or making things worse, depending on how you handle that situation. So if the child is safe and you notice that's happening, um, make a judgment call. Just know that either way, there's going to be some kind of backlash, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And that's the case when we have to make a mandated report, right? Is
right.
sometimes we want to help the parents. There's usually a reason, or some kind of some trauma. There's reasons why caregivers might put their child in jeopardy. It is usually rooted in something's going on. But again, our number one priority is keeping them safe. I did have an experience where a parent came to school years ago and was clearly drunk. But it was easy to deter. They smoked alcohol. Like, I could see that they were stumbling, and we didn't let them leave campus with them. And we did have to call DCFS for that. So I think if very clear evidence that this person is influenced and didn't get in the car, is going to put them in harm's way, then you have a duty to report that. Now, will it be accepted? That the jury's out on that. But you want to make sure that you've done your due diligence, documented that you did what was important to okay.
And know the laws. Know the laws.
Yeah.
They're very easy to search for. You'd be surprised what's in there and what's not.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, one of the things that Rico really helped with a few years ago when legalization was happening, we were seeing a lot of illegal dispensaries popping up like right to our schools. And, there are laws in terms of like how far away a dispensary can be in a school zone. So the a connection at the Drug Policy Alliance talked about what they were seeing, how to talk about connections with, a legal dispensary or other organization, mental health organization, substance use organization that can come in and really provide tangible resources. That's so critical. Had webinars where caregivers were able to then follow up and share if they had their own substance use, whether it was like more hard drugs or alcohol. So you want to be able to provide an open space where families feel safe to come forward and talk to you and get help instead of like, oh, you're doing this, I'm calling you back. If they're reaching out to you and want to, like, you definitely want to provide those resources for them and have an open heart, open mind without judgment.
Compassion.
Yeah.
And empathy, right?
So I think we're going to wrap up. So I want to, Rico, can you please let them know? So how do they find the State of Cannabis Newshour if they want to get more real information about cannabis policy and what's happening?
Yeah, so I just let people know up front, if you do listen to the State of Cannabis Newshour, it is uncensored. It's more of an adult program. But we do have like scientists, lawyers, doctors on our team. Nonprofit news, and we're all about connecting the communities with real information. You have liberals, you have conservatives on there, you have people that don't really adhere to politics, and it's important we come together for this conversation so we don't have one side or the other out of the loop, right? So like whether the Democrats or the Republicans are in charge of this huge cannabis economy that's happening right now, we got to make sure they all are in the same room for the same conversations, getting the same information, right? Because if history repeats itself, our communities are the first to suffer when somebody else don't have the facts right.
So how can you watch State of Cannabis Newshour?
Oh, sorry. So Cannabis Newshour on Clubhouse. It's the uncensored version. And you can also get it on Apple Podcasts, any podcast services. I'll be going off on tangents. And you also see like my attention deficit is like crazy right now. TV over here, baby over here. She's like choking me out. So I apologize. I'm like all over the place here. Right? Clubhouse, any podcast network, the State of Cannabis News Hour. It's me and 11 other thought leaders in the industry. We read the biggest headlines from vetted news sources and we respond to them. We get the audience involved as well, whether it's just questions or comments. And we have real conversations. Sometimes it gets really heated. We talk about how the Democrats and Republicans are going to handle it. But those are the arguments that we need to have now. So the other side knows exactly how we feel, how our communities suffered, how we're getting like a penny on every dollar that our Caucasian counterparts in this industry are getting right now. And we need to talk about that. We need to let them know what's going on and know that, like you said earlier, everything is systemic. We have the chance to make it more equitable than anything else right now. And they got to get that information. We put that information out to everybody and you can see progress happening in real time. So you can find me, State of Cannabis Newshour, at the State of Cannabis Newshour, and also on a personal level, at Rico Lamitte, as well, across all social networks. I try to put out good information. You're going to see a little bit of our home life. Mine is a little bit more personal, than Jasmine's social work stage. You're going to see me ranting. You see me being a human being. That's what I do. But like a little background on me from the South, played college football in the Big Ten, had an opioid addiction, after that, after getting hurt training for the NFL. And then by a roundabout way, I ended up on the streets in Chicago for a while, homeless, 3.2 GPA, top 10 university at the time. I know we're not going to talk about Pomona right now, but I fell into a bad situation because of what was given to us as medicine, right? But I lived to talk about it. I ended up in corporate finance 10 years, and I found cannabis as medicine. And you know how much I became passionate about it, Jasmine. And now I have an opportunity to spread the word, see how it can be used as medicine to help me break my vices, certain vices. And people need to understand the science behind it because I did not, right? And I could have harmed myself. So like follow us on there, both CANiVISION, and CANiVISION Global. My company is CANiVISION.global. We put out a lot of these news stories that I cover on State of Cannabis Newshour, and we offer links there to doctors, to services, resources on local level across the U.S. We let people know about the hypocrisy, let people know about the good stories. It's a good place to be, and you're going to find a lot of the followers and the people who interact on our pages are experts. Period. Vetted experts. So use us as a resource. It's all about education. And as a social worker, thank you all for what you do. Jasmine has taught me so much over the last 12 years, 13, almost now, that we've been together about the field of social work, how important it is to the community. And I really appreciate it. Mental health is paramount, especially in our communities. We need to learn more. We need to practice more, whether it's with holistic medicine or traditional medicine. Knowing what each is and having access to that information is more important than anything. All right. So
thank you so much for joining me today. So I will be posting this video for you to save for later or to watch later, and to please share so we can get the word out. I'll also link Rico's social media and all of that. Thank you again for coming, and I hope you all have a great night. Put our daughter to bed, and so have a good one. And thank you again.
much love.